You're listening to Podcasts with Park Rangers, a show where we explore the importance of our national parks and historic sites with those who live and work in them every day. We'll learn about history, science, and the beauty of nature from a unique perspective. I'm your host, Lucas VK. Today we interview Kevin Sturmer, a climbing ranger at Rocky Mountain National Park in Colorado.
Who knows how many times I've been on the Longs Peak Trail and into the summit of Longs Peak, right? But I cannot walk up that trail without stopping and being like, whoa, holy cow, this is amazing. You know, and I think that's the special thing about Rocky is that it continues no matter how many days I go out to recreate or to just take a walk or, just have some time. No matter how many times I've done that, it always stops me in my tracks.
Stay tuned. We'll talk about life as a climbing ranger, search and rescue, and the amazing opportunities at Rocky to recreate. This podcast is brought to you by our Patreon fan of the month, Kevin Cartwright in Los Angeles, California. Kevin's favorite park covers 500 miles of mountain trails all the way to the beaches of Malibu. The diverse Santa Monica Mountain National Recreation Area just outside of LA offers a bit of something for everyone. Thank you, Kevin, for your support of our podcast. Longs Peak, arguably one of the most famous summits in Colorado, the tallest mountain in Rocky Mountain National Park. One Colorado mountaineering expert muses, Longs Peak is unquestionably the monarch of the Front Range and northern Colorado. It dominates all within sight of it. The reason for its popularity is obvious. Longs enraptures all but the most heartless soul. Many a climber yearns to conquer Longs Peak, but only half of those who attempt the mountain reach the summit. Constant weather changes, altitude, and sheer cliff faces are some of the dangers to expect. And still, Longs claims at least 2 lives every year. In the winter of 1925, Agnes Vail, an experienced mountaineer and the first woman to climb the east face of Longs Peak, died of hypothermia on the descent of that same trip. The public demanded Rocky Mountain National Park work to ensure the safety of visitors on Longs Peak. And while the park decided mountaineers are ultimately responsible for themselves, they rerouted the trail, built an emergency shelter near the summit, and stationed rangers in the backcountry to meet mountaineers and ensure public safety. The ways people enjoy Longs has changed over the years. People still hike the traditional mountaineering trail, and climbers summit via a difficult and technical climb up the sheer cliff face of the mountain, known as the Diamond. And on these trips, many visitors encounter the Longs Peak Rangers, educating visitors on the beauty and hazards of the mountain. Today we sit down with climbing ranger Kevin Sturmer. And though they no longer go by the moniker, he is one of the Longs Peak Rangers at Rocky Mountain National Park.
So welcome to Rocky Mountain National Park. My name's Kevin Sturmer.
Ranger Kevin is a climbing fanatic and found himself going down a different career path before he even imagined being a ranger.
Yeah, it totally happened by accident. So I was a climber way before I was a ranger. Never even knew there was something called a climbing ranger. After college, a friend of mine from college and we moved out to Colorado, lived in Summit County for a few years and was psyched to get out climbing and skiing, and we did a lot of rivering, kayaking, rafting, stuff like that. But climbing is always my favorite thing to do and the thing that I always wanted to spend my time doing.
Through climbing, he found a vocation that would later become critical for his current position.
Just from being out climbing with friends and doing that whole deal, you find yourself further and further away from places that could help you if you get hurt. So I was like, oh man, maybe I should go get my, a couple of my climbing partners were EMTs. And I was like, maybe I should go do that. So I went and I got my EMT card. And then I was like, well, I kind of like this. And I moved through the progressions of working emergency services and eventually became a paramedic.
Kevin fell into the career of climbing ranger through a friend. The position offered a unique intersection of climbing and being an EMT.
A good friend of mine climbing friend, just climbing, skiing buddy, he had the job that I had.
Right.
And he was like, hey, you should apply for this job. And I was like, okay, sounds good. And I had no idea what I was getting into. And like I said, I just got lucky. I happened to take the thing that when I was in my 20s, all I wanted to do was go rock climbing. And people that gravitate to that sport, I think a lot of us have the same story. Like you start climbing, all of a sudden you get bit by the bug, and all you want to do is go climbing. And next thing you know, you're constantly quitting your job because you want to go on, multi-month climbing adventures.
And a lot of jobs aren't okay with that.
Yeah. So when my friend called me and he was like, hey man, like we go climbing at work, like we should do this. And I had no idea what even like being a ranger even meant. And there I was. Well, now I'm here.
Cool. Nice. Yeah, you've made it almost a decade-long career at this point.
Almost, yeah.
So you mentioned coming out here after college. Where were you climbing before? It was a thing through college and even before that? Yeah,
I left college a little early. I actually don't have a degree. So I said I kind of hung my hat on having a trade as a paramedic. But so I moved out here when I was 20.
From where?
So I grew up in New York.
Okay.
In Long Island, actually. Not much climbing going on there.
Yeah, not.
And I went to school in Massachusetts. And, like I dabbled a little bit with climbing in college. I remember, when I was 19, I think I went climbing like twice, once inside with a friend that took me, and then a friend of mine who lived in New Jersey that I went to college with. I went out to hang out with him like over summer break, and there was a little bit of like small choss pile of rock climbing out by his house. So he took me climbing, and I was like, oh, this is kind of fun. And then once I moved out to Colorado, that's when I really jumped into it. So I had only been climbing a handful of times before I moved here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you really got bit by the bug while you were here in the Rockies.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm not very familiar with climbing myself, and I don't know how many of our listeners will be. I mean, I've been on a few rock walls before.
Cool, man.
But you are a climbing ranger, and of course, this is our first time on the show having that specific job kind of highlighted. So can you describe what your job entails? There's probably a multifaceted, but what's a typical day, if you can say?
Yeah, sure. So, our job is to be out and about in the backcountry. So like when we're lingering around the office, people start asking questions. Mike and I do a little bit more office time because we have some other duties like doing like purchasing for search and rescue equipment and stuff like that. But for the most part, we're out and about every day. In the winter, we're going out on a ski patrol. In the summer, we're going out either hiking or climbing. Do some climbing in the winter as well. We're basically out there talking with the user group, just answering questions, being familiar with the park. We participate in search and rescue. It's not the only thing that we do, but it's part of our job. And in order to do that job well, you have to know the ins and outs of the park. So we do our best to learn every inch of the park, be familiar with all the climbing routes, the popular ones and not so popular.
Right.
And then, we do a lot of like leave no trace education, a lot of like resource protection education. Climbing is just like any other activity where our enjoyment and love for that activity leaves a print on our park. We try to educate people on how to leave the least amount of impact as we possibly can as climbers in a national park.
While still enjoying the sport that you yourself as a climber.
Yeah, enjoy. I mean, it's great. So so we just do our best to go out and talk to as many people as we can in a day. And a lot of folks are, will stop us and ask us questions and just chat with people.
Cool.
Yeah. And then when there's emergencies, we participate in search and rescue, which is a park-wide program here. So all divisions, all employees here participate in the search and rescue program if they want to. It happens to lie in the visitor protection division, which is where we're aligned with. So by default, like our office happens to be the search and rescue cache, like where we keep all of our stuff. And we generally help organize the trainings and do that sort of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned the search and rescue. What can that entail sometimes?
Sure. Search and rescue it runs the full spectrum. It could just be, someone with a sprained ankle, an eighth of the mile up the trail, or maybe someone who's a little altitude sick, to, dealing with someone who died in the backcountry. Everything in between.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that has to be a little rough at times, but you're out there performing a service to help folks.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's nice to be in a career where you can help people for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So a big part of your job is understanding the mountain seasonally.
Yeah, for sure. Like definitely knowing what places hold snow, till late in the summer, and having a good grasp on the geography of the park. So, if a visitor does call in and they're lost, sometimes we can just talk that person out over the phone. We can kind of just get them to describe to us where they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And your familiarity with it helps kind of.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Let's talk a little more about climbing just as an activity. I mentioned that I've been on a few rock walls myself, but a lot of people listening to the show may have never climbed before, even on a rock wall.
Yeah.
Can you talk about what climbing is like?
Climbing is awesome. So basically, a lot of the climbing we do around here is like technical rock climbing in what we call fifth class terrain, right? Okay. So if you think about terrain's graded on class 1 through 5. So basically class 1 is like a trail that's been built, that's, relatively easy to walk up and down, not much different from walking up and down on a sidewalk.
Maybe
right?
A little scrambling.
So maybe like you started doing a little scrambling, or maybe walking on a little ski slope or something. Now we're kind of in like class 2 terrain. Maybe class 3 terrain. We gotta, every now and again, we put our hands down, and then once we get into like 4th class terrain, that's kind of like where we're doing more climbing type moves, where we are using our hands and feet, but maybe it's kind of real low angle.
Yeah.
And then we get into that 5th class terrain, which, once we're dealing with 5th class terrain, we're kind of in a spot where you have to use your hands and feet in a particular manner to move up, right? And then what we do is we use a rope, and then we have a bunch of gear that you can put in and out of the rock, right? They're called like cams and nuts and things like that. And you climb up, placing that stuff, and then attaching your rope to those things. In case you were to fall, your rope and then that fall protection would stop you from hitting the ground. Right. And climbing is it's such a broad term, everything from hiking 14ers, that's climbing, all the way to, climbing on, the east face of Long's Peak, right? The Diamond, which is, very steep.
Completely vertical.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And we have all kinds of wonderful climbing here in the park. We have face climbing, crack climbing, slabby, kind of lower angle climbing, and then real steep to slightly overhanging.
Okay. So at what point when you're climbing do you begin to utilize the rope? Is it class 3?
It depends, if you're kind of doing more like the mountaineering type thing and you're in like kind of moderate to steep snow, or maybe you're in like 4th class terrain. Some folks like to use a rope because, that classification doesn't always necessarily take into account what the consequences are if you fall, right?
Yeah.
So 4th class can be really, really exposed, right? We have lots of really rad 4th class terrain in the park here, which if you were to slip and fall, you wouldn't be able to stop yourself.
Yeah, that exposure.
Yeah, so you'd want to use rope for that.
Right.
So it's very individual when to use the rope, but most folks will start using a rope in low 5th class terrain. As soon as you're in that, it goes by so we use something called the Yosemite decimal system. So it's like So rock climbing is graded by like 5 decimal a number. So like
Ah.
5.5 or 5.8 or 5.10.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So within
So that
that
5
fifth.
designates the fifth class, and then that next number is the difficulty of that route, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 15.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then once you hit the number 10, it's actually broken down into even a further subcategory of A, B, C, and D, equaling harder. And then the other really cool, fun, unique thing we have here for climbing at Rocky is, so bouldering has gained popularity.
Yeah.
In bouldering, you don't really need a lot of gear for. All you need is like a pad. It's basically like a foldable mattress, and you climb on like big boulders that are kind of close to the ground, right? So if you fall, you only fall a few feet. You don't use a rope, or you don't use any fall protection or anything, and you just fall down onto your pad, or you're with your buddies and they kind of help like spot you. And Rocky has a really high concentration of alpine bouldering. So really, really amazing bouldering that's, a few miles up into the backcountry, which is kind of a rare thing for bouldering. And it's world class. People travel from all over the world to come bouldering at Rocky. It's like climbing rangers, like we go on bouldering patrols all the time too.
Yeah.
So that's kind of nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all about getting in touch with that user group.
Yeah.
Right?
And then in the winter, everything freezes, right? And we go ice climbing.
Oh, yeah. That has to be very cool.
Yep.
You find a lot of people getting permits for that activity, and
yeah, you don't have to get a permit to go climbing. You just need a permit if you want to bivvy, if you want to like spend the night out at the base of the route that you're going to climb.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So it's really accessible.
Yep.
So you mentioned you spend a little bit of your time in the office, perhaps more so than some of the part-time people, part-time climbing rangers.
Yeah.
So how much actual climbing do you do on your job?
I mean, our seasonal staff, ideally, they're out every day.
Yeah.
We try to do it. So the way we split it up is we always have a climbing ranger on Longs Peak, and that's generally a non-technical hiking patrol. And we'll have them. I don't know if you guys have ever been up the Keyhole route, which is
haven't been that way.
That's the popular route to the summit of Longs Peak, and we get tons of people up there. It's super busy, and it's like rightfully so, it's like one of the most amazing 14er routes in Colorado. It just requires, walking, but again, it doesn't take into account that there's times that you're walking on basically a little sidewalk with slippery rock that if you were to slip and fall, you'll fall 1,500 feet. So we always have 1 or 2 climbing rangers up there just walking around on a patrol, and then we usually have 1 or 2 groups too, out on a technical climbing patrol, and then maybe someone's out bouldering or just going hiking somewhere to familiarize themselves. So our seasonal crew is great. They're out every day. We all take a turn 1 day a week in the office, is what we call the SAR duty officer, which means when an emergency call comes in, whoever that, we call it for short, we call it the SDO. So whoever the SDO is for the day will take that initial call. Okay,
so that's on search and rescue.
So we each take, every 2 weeks, we each take a turn 1 day in every 2 week period. We'll play that role. Yeah, so in the summertime we're rock and rolling. We work 4 10-hour days, and I'd say I spend one entire day myself. I'll spend one entire day in the office doing purchasing or organizing or doing some stuff, and then those other 3 days I'll be out either climbing or hiking or doing whatever needs to be done. Yeah. Of course, that's the plan, but the plan changes on a minute by minute basis.
Yeah, there's no typical day necessarily for you.
And our seasonal crew, I mean, they're amazing. They're the fittest, most always psyched people I've ever been around, and I do everything that I can just to stay as psyched and as fit as they are. I mean, they're an unbelievable tough bunch to keep up with. Yeah. And so they're out every day.
You've talked about some of the seasonality and how your duties will shift through the winter and the summer. So what are some of the differences in your job between just summer and winter time?
Summer is like full throttle every day. Yeah. There's lots and lots of people. I never know what I'm going to walk into at work. You know, we could be doing multiple rescues a day, or we may be getting lucky and doing really awesome climber patrols at faraway areas, and we kind of hit our stride doing that. Tons of walk-in. Of course, the big thing with summer, particularly with me, is that we have a thunderstorm here every afternoon, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I spend a lot of time running from lightning.
Yeah.
So
or educating other people about the dangers
we do a lot
of
of lightning educate. Yeah. Folks will stop me a lot, and they'll ask. I'll be going down because the weather looks like it's getting bad, and I'm terrified of lightning.
Yeah.
And they'll stop me and say, "Hey, do you think we should go down?" And I never say yes, go down now, but I always say, "Well, you're welcome to do what you like. I'm going down right now."
Right. Yeah.
And I try to kind of set that example. And then compared to the winters, although the winters have gotten much busier here,
Mm-hmm.
particularly on the weekends, midweek it's still a lot quieter. It's always really cold. The wind blows 60 miles an hour every day.
Mm-hmm.
And we're doing more ski patrol type stuff. So we're always traveling on skis.
Yeah.
We do like a snow survey for the USGS once a month. And, things kind of, the winter has historically always been we've kind of caught our breath a little bit. And more and more every winter, I seem to be able to catch my breath a little bit less,
Mm.
I was just remarking to one of my supervisors this morning that the seasonal crew is coming in on Monday, and I swear, like, it felt like a week ago that it was September 30th, which was the last day of the season last year, and
It's been a busy winter time.
it's always just a little bit busier. Our search and rescue load comes down quite a bit in the winter.
Yeah.
When you do have a search and rescue in the winter, it's very nerve-wracking. It's because it's much more uncomfortable. It's a lot colder.
Yeah.
Things progress things can get really bad really quickly in the winter.
Mm-hmm.
So although our load goes down a little bit, it definitely, when we do have to go out and do a rescue, it's definitely kind of ramped up a little bit in the winter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Longs Peak. So it's a famous 14er, which is a mountain over 14,000 feet. Can you describe what Longs Peak is like, just visually, and how demanding a hike is it?
Sure. Yeah, Longs Peak it's awesome. It's like rock. It's amazing. It's massive chunk of rock.
Mm-hmm.
And yep, it's one of the 14ers in Colorado. It's super strenuous to go up and down. There's some amazing, just like, shorter hikes on Longs Peak. Like a really great day is to walk to Chasm Lake or Peacock Pool, or even just go up to Battle Mountain Junction, which is like right at tree line. And you just get the most amazing views you could ever imagine up there. It's wonderful. Longs Peak is also super harsh. It's, the weather changes literally by the minute. It could be sunny in Bluebird, middle of July, and then the next minute it's snowing, blowing 60 miles an hour, raining sideways, snowing sideways, lightning, thunder.
Yeah.
Your worst nightmare.
Just drop of a hat.
Yeah.
Changes.
Yeah. It's really strenuous. The most popular way up is called the Keyhole route, and that's about a 15-mile round trip hike. The last mile or so is the most difficult and technical, and that's when you go through this feature at a little above 12,000 feet. You go through this feature called the Keyhole, and you actually end up on the west side of the mountain. It's so amazing. You start your hike on the east side at 9,000 feet, and you walk up to 12,000 feet, and then you walk through a slot in the mountain, basically, and now you're on the west side. You're on like the northwest side, and then you walk south, and then you take a turn right at the last minute before you get to the summit. Like the last little bit, the last hard climb is called the home stretch, and that actually turns back east. So you walk up, you're on the west side of the mountain walking up, heading east, and then you end up on the summit. So you circumnavigate. You get to hike on 2/3 of the mountain to hike the keyhole.
Wow.
It's not uncommon to see 400 or 500 people on the keyhole route on a busy holiday weekend, Saturday, 4th of July, Labor Day, something like that. Tons of people up there. Midweek is a little quieter. And of course, there's literally thousands of ways to summit, enjoy, recreate on Longs Peak.
Mm-hmm.
You can ski, you can walk, you can hike, you can run. You could include it in a multi-peak adventure.
Yeah.
You can climb 3rd-class terrain. You can climb 5th-class terrain. Some of the most amazing routes in Colorado go up the Diamond, which is the east face of Longs Peak.
Okay.
It's wonderful.
Is that right along the keyhole route? Or?
No, so the east face is that sheer vertical wall.
Mm-hmm.
It's called the Diamond, actually, because it's kind of shaped like a diamond. And about halfway in between the diamond is split by this huge ledge called Broadway Ledge. You can actually walk back and forth on.
Okay.
And that has some of the hardest rock climbs in the world actually are up there as well. And pretty technical. It's really, really featured, so it really lends itself to rock climbing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing.
Longs Peak is a very popular
mm-hmm.
area, and for good reason.
Yeah, and I definitely have a love-hate relationship with Longs Peak.
Really?
We spend a lot of time up there, and I've had the most amazing experiences up there,
mm-hmm.
and the worst experiences up there. So it's cool. It keeps you on your toes.
Yeah.
It's something you want to be prepared for.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
And as you said, it can shift in an instant,
mm-hmm.
the conditions.
Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, it's pretty high in altitude too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just an additional thing to
that
go.
Thin air challenge.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So part of your job is actually doing overnights occasionally on Longs Peak.
Yeah.
Can you talk about kind of the purpose behind that? What is the reason for overnighting out there?
Yeah, so a big thing that the climbing staff does is we do a lot of preventative search and rescue.
Mm-hmm.
We call it PSAR. And preventative search and rescue is just like what I told you, like what climbing rangers do. Like we go out and we recreate, like we get amongst the folks enjoying the park,
mm-hmm.
and we talk to them about how to take care of the resource and how to stay safe and how to make good decisions. And so one thing that we do is we have a ranger shelter up there called the Chasm Shelter.
Mm-hmm.
So our staff will go up there and we all take turns. A lot of times we'll do it over the weekends. We'll hike up on a Friday afternoon or a Saturday afternoon. We spend the night in the shelter, and then Sunday we wake up and maybe we'll go hike the Keyhole, or we'll hike like this route called Clark's Arrow, or maybe we'll go rock climbing and we'll go climb the Diamond or the Chasm View Wall or the North Face, something like that.
Really get a first look at the conditions out there and everything.
Yeah, and it's nice to do, it's a wonderful place to stay. We have the advantage of not having to sleep in the dirt. We get to sleep in the shelter, which is kind of nice, and we can cook. It's an amazing place to spend the night out. The Chasm Shelter has definitely saved me over and over again, whether it was a storm and I was running down to hide from the lightning, or maybe we had someone really sick that we had to take care of up there, and it's nice to be able to get to the shelter and take care of folks.
Utilize that shelter for that a bit.
We sure do. And one really fun thing about the shelter is people are really curious about the shelter, the public, and they'll come over and kind of like poke their head in and out. And they're always really surprised because it's like, hey, come on in. And they're like, really? Or if it's raining, we're like, get in here.
Yeah.
And it's kind of cool, and we get a chance to kind of just converse with the public that way, and we'll give them some hot chocolate or some coffee or something.
Nice.
And it's kind of a fun experience. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
A little shelter from the storm, perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about kind of how it's generally more of a hike, but there's climbing, some pretty world-class climbing out that way.
Yeah, and we actually say like the Keyhole is like, it's not just a hike. I mean, it's definitely mountaineering in third-class terrain with serious fall consequences.
Right, yeah. So what are some of the other world-class climbs outside of the Longs Peak area?
So we have Lumpy Ridge in the valley here, which is really wonderful granite crack climbing.
Okay.
Going back up into the Alpine of the park, we have Glacier Gorge, where we have all like Spearhead and Chief's Head and Arrowhead all has amazing rock climbing on it. And then you can get a little further away, like out in the Mummy Range, like easily a lifetime worth of rock climbing here.
Yeah. There are a good bit of variety within those, I imagine.
Yeah,
well.
there is. Yep. There's everything from crack climbing, steep face climbing, like slabby, featureless type rock climbs. Hallett Peak is a really cool thing because Hallett Peak is only like a 45-minute walk from the trailhead, maybe an hour. But it's nice. You get this really awesome alpine climbing experience, but you're actually only like an hour from the trailhead, which is it's kind of like a nice quick jaunt up there. And 45 minutes ago you were kind of like trying to find a parking spot in Bear Lake, and like standing next to folks that may not travel any further past Bear Lake, which is 0.1 miles from the trailhead, right?
Yeah.
And in 45 minutes you're up on this, climbing this huge 1,000-foot alpine face. It's awesome.
Where you could really just spend a day climbing, feeling fairly remote. But
yeah, absolutely.
Why did you decide finally to take your passion and make it your job? Does it kind of change the way you feel about climbing as a hobby, or?
It has changed it a lot.
Yeah.
A ton. And it's a little unfortunate, but it's okay. Like it's just different. It's just a little different. The big joke is like, what do climbing rangers do on their days off? They go rock climbing. Like I don't know what else to do with myself. So I go rock climbing. But like I said, I accidentally fell into this job, and I mean, that's what everyone wants to do, right? They want to do their passion as work.
Right.
Something that really helped me is, like I said, I don't have a college degree, but I went to paramedic school.
Right.
And I've worked as what I'll call like a classic paramedic, is, working on the ambulance in a busy city, doing that deal. And it's okay, but that was definitely something that wasn't for me. And I like a little bit of that, but I don't want to do that all the time.
Right.
And so not only did I get super lucky that I get to go rock climbing when I'm at work, which is what I want to go do, but I also, when we have to do search and rescue, I get to be a paramedic.
Yeah, you're using that skill set.
But I get to do it in the mountains, which is kind of funny that I even mention that, because I hate doing medicine in the mountains.
Yeah.
But I work as needed. I work a few days a month on the ambulance here in town at the Estes Park Medical Center. So that still keeps me in the mix of clinical medicine, emergency medicine, but then I get to use my skills out in the backcountry.
Right.
Emergency services is so hard, police, fire, EMS, it's such a hard job. It takes such a toll on you. You don't sleep a lot.
Yeah.
It's hard to have a good diet. It's hard to exercise properly. And it's a tough life. It really is. And to be able to still use some of those skills, but to have maybe a little different kind of lifestyle and schedule and be able to do it in the mountains.
Yeah.
I mean, it's awesome.
Yeah.
It's awesome. But I definitely, I from time to time, I've been known to curse the mountains while I was trying to practice emergency medicine.
Yeah. It brings a unique set of challenges. It really puts it in a different context for you as well, right?
Yeah, it does. And I feel lucky that I get to work. I get to take both of those skills and put them together. I mean, that's as good as it gets, right?
Yeah. Very cool. So what is your favorite thing about being a climbing ranger?
Oh, man. I mean, there are lots of favorite things, It's like, I think to start, like the staff at Rocky here, and by staff, I don't mean just the other rangers, like the entire park. Like, I just feel it's awesome. Like the people that I work with are amazing. And that goes from everything from, the folks that work in facilities to the protection rangers that I work with. Everyone is just, they're amazing people to be with. Like a lot of us are like-minded, and it's amazing to work with these people.
Yeah.
My favorite thing about being a climber ranger is also the hardest thing about being a climber ranger is that I get to help people all the time.
Yeah.
And it's awesome. But I have to help people on their worst day of their life, which is such a downer. Like, I would love to meet these people in any other context than the context that I get to meet them. Those are on the days when we have to rescue, right? But on the days when we don't have to do those rescues, and I go out as a climbing ranger, then I get to interact with multiple user groups that are having the best day of their life.
There you go. Yeah.
Whether it's like a person climbing pear buttress, which is like the classic at Lumpy Ridge for the first time, and they're just like, this is amazing, all the way to, maybe someone who doesn't get out that often and they saw snow for the first time, and and I get to talk with those people. And I think that's the best thing about being a climb ranger is the interaction with both my colleagues and the public. And then, of course, the seasonal staff, they're just like our crew, the climbing crew, or they're just amazing. I've learned so much from all of them, and it's just like I feel just like privileged that I even get to like walk near them. Like they're just they're amazing.
Yeah. Sounds like a intense and very passionate group.
It's great. It really is.
So what's your favorite thing about Rocky Mountain National Park, being here for almost a decade now?
Like the park itself, like maybe like
because we talked a bit about the staff, and I mean it's a huge operation here, which takes a lot of drive from the people. But the park as a whole, you've experienced a good bit of it.
I think the coolest thing about the park is I can wake up in the morning and I can put my ski boots on and go skiing, and then I can ski for a couple hours, and I can come back down and I can go grab my climbing gear and go rock climbing in the afternoon, and then I can maybe go and do some bouldering or go ice climbing or something all in the same day, or go for a trail run. Like I think the multisporting in Rocky Mountain National Park is just absolutely amazing. So that's like the coolest thing that I like when I start my day with in one kind of style of clothing, like maybe like ski clothes, and end in like shorts and a t-shirt, like bouldering out behind my house. That's really cool.
That is very cool. So when you think of Rocky Mountain National Park, what does the place make you feel? Like, why is this place special to you?
Oh man, I've had so many experiences in Rocky, like personal experiences, that I think that's probably like, I hope that's not like the cop-out answer. Like you could probably talk to every ranger in every park and they say, man, I have these amazing experiences, in my park. But that's, like those, I still can't walk. Who knows how many times I've been on the Longs Peak Trail and into the summit of Longs Peak, right? And there's a lot of people around here that can say that, but I cannot walk up that trail without stopping and like looking up at the Diamond, or looking up at the north face of Longs, or looking at the Keeners route and just being like, whoa, holy cow, this is amazing. And I think that's the special thing about Rocky, is that it continues no matter how many days I go out to recreate or to just take a walk or, just have some time. No matter how many times I've done that, it always stops me in my tracks, like to stop and look and like listen, or just kind of take it all in, and sometimes it only stops me for a second or two, and but lo and behold, every day I go out, it stops me for some reason, and I have to like stop and look up and appreciate, that I get to be working and recreating here. It's amazing.
Yeah, pretty awe-inspiring place.
Yeah, totally.
So, just going bigger picture from Rocky, this has been the bulk of your experience of the national park system. But what's the importance of the national park system as a whole to you, and why is it important to preserve the NPS?
Yeah, I think, wild places where you can go and be by yourself are getting less and less. Mm-hmm. And that's the conundrum that we all live, right? Like, we want those wild, quiet places, but by me going to those wild, quiet places, they're not as quiet or wild as they were before I got there, right?
Right.
And so the park system it's here to protect those places, and that's a slippery slope. That it's a brave thing to take on, and it's a really hard job. But without these wild open spaces or them getting smaller and smaller, we'll all go nuts, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's why you guys packed up out of Denver and moved into an RV.
Yeah, for sure.
And outdoor recreation has gotten super, super popular, and that's awesome. It's like the same reason, someone learned how to go rock climbing today is the same reason that I went to learn how to go rock climbing 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. And the parks are keeping those wild places wild and protecting those areas, so we don't, so one day I don't look up at, Longs Peak doesn't stop me in my tracks, and I look up and I see a condo complex or something on the side of the
billboard
mountain.
Up in the
and the Park Service has a really hard job, and it's really tricky, and I hope they keep doing it.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Our national parks offer us a place to recreate and appreciate the wild, whether you're a hiker, biker, or climber. Rangers like Kevin Sturmer help make these wild places a safer place for us to enjoy. And by examining the way Kevin has woven together his hobbies and passions within his career, can we be inspired to turn our own passions into something that helps others? Whether we uplift people through our careers or through volunteer opportunities or enthusiast groups, there's always a way to share our skills and interests with those around us. If you've enjoyed the show, join our National Park fan community on Patreon. You'll help keep this show on the road and receive bonus episodes, invites to hike with us, postcards, and more. $2 a month gets access to bonus interview questions. A link is posted in our show notes, or visit podcastswithparkrangers.com for more info. You can also help us out by leaving a review on iTunes or your favorite podcast provider to help us improve the show. Stay with us through the final minutes for a short preview of our next episode. We like to highlight on our show ways that a typical park visitor can give back to their national parks. All of our public lands are in search of volunteers, whether it's with the Bureau of Land Management, the U.S. Forest Service, or the National Park Service, which includes Rocky Mountain National Park. There's probably a volunteer opportunity in your area. Find out more information by visiting volunteer.gov. Even though we interview park rangers, we are not affiliated with the National Park Service, and any views expressed are not necessarily those of the Park Service. We're just fans of the national parks, like you. Coming up in episode 11 of Podcasts with Park Rangers, we travel to Minuteman Missile National Historic Site and take a look into the Cold War with Superintendent Eric Leonard. We'll discuss tensions with the USSR that led to the creation of a nuclear arsenal just beneath the plains of South Dakota.